The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Time's up, Biden. A credible sexual assault allegation has been raised, and he needs to answer for it. By Lauren Martinchek on Medium. Allegations of a sexual assault that took place in 1993 have been raised against the current frontrunner for the Democratic nomination, Joe Biden. Alana Vajanos with HuffPost writes, Tara Reid, who was at the time serving as an aide in Biden's Senate office, told podcast host Katie Halper that Biden kissed her and penetrated her with his fingers without her consent. Reid said she pushed Biden off of her and he allegedly became annoyed and said, "Come on, man, I heard you liked me." It was like everything shattered in that moment, Reid told Halper in the interview, which was posted Wednesday. He was like my father's age. He was this champion of women's rights in my eyes. I couldn't believe it was happening. Reid alleges that after she pulled away from Biden, he pointed in her face and said, "You're nothing to me." Last April, Reid was one of 8 women to accuse the former vice president of inappropriate touching. Reid told The Intercept's Ryan Grimm this week that she only told the media part of her story at the time because she received an onslaught of harassment that instantly quieted her. Joe Biden, at the very least, should drop out of the race immediately, and anyone who takes these matters seriously should be demanding the same. When women come forward to share their truths about one of the most horrifying and vulnerable moments of their lives, they deserve to be believed, acknowledged, and heard, and it breaks my heart that Ms. Reid had been living with this for so long. Everything about this account is chilling, but I cannot even begin to imagine what must have been going through her mind when a United States senator looked her in the eyes, pointed at her, and told her, "You're nothing to me." Joe Biden not only allegedly forced himself on this woman, he then actively reminded her of the power dynamic between them afterwards. To look her in the eye and tell her that she's nothing was a very clear, deliberate message that he was the man in a position of power, she was just a staffer, and he wasn't even going to worry about someone believing her over him. Not only did he violate her, he decided to put her in her place afterwards, too. After detailing the account that Ms. Reid gave, the HuffPost piece continues and states, last year, after she first accused Biden of inappropriate touching, Reid was accused of being politically motivated and called a Russian operative after a Medium post in which she praised Russia and its president Vladimir Putin resurfaced. As the 2020 campaign for president continued, Reid had a change of heart about remaining silent, according to The Intercept. In January, she approached Time's Up, the anti-sexual violence organization established in the wake of the Me Too movement, to help her. The Intercept reports that by February, Time's Up told her they could not help because Biden was a candidate for federal office, and if they assisted her, they could lose the organization's nonprofit status, which, according to a tax lawyer from Loyola, was not the case. As disturbing as all of this is, what I can't help but notice above almost everything else is the sudden quiet from liberal elite circles who not so long ago were demanding that Brett Kavanaugh be denied a seat on the Supreme Court when he faced allegations of his own. The same liberal elite circles who continue to bring up the allegations against Donald Trump, Harvey Weinstein, and declare that women need to be believed when they tell their stories. Predictably, when it's one of their own, the tones change. Suddenly you are to be ignored or called a Russian asset if they acknowledge you at all. The silence is deafening. For far too long, women have only been allowed to speak their truths when it's deemed convenient. For far too long, we have swallowed our stories and the magnitude of what so many of us have endured, all because we are conditioned to be afraid or less motivated to do so. No more. Joe Biden will not hide from this forever. Her story will not go away. We will not let it. A simple denial from a campaign staffer is not going to be enough. Joe Biden needs to answer for these allegations himself, and it should go without saying that Tara deserves to have her story treated with credibility until it's proven not to be. I'm not going to choose between 2 rapists. Neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden will ever get my vote, and they shouldn't get yours either. Biden consolidates support but trails badly in enthusiasm, by Sophie Sinozic. Former Vice President Joe Biden has emerged as the Democrats' top choice for the presidential nomination in a new ABC News/Washington Post poll, but with only bare majority support within his party and a massive enthusiasm gap in a November matchup against President Donald Trump. Indeed, strong enthusiasm for Biden among his supporters at just 24% is the lowest on record for a Democratic presidential candidate in 20 years of ABC Post polls. More than twice as many of Trump's supporters are highly enthusiastic about supporting him, 53%. Trump's still strong rating on the economy is another challenge for Biden. So is this. Among Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents who prefer Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders for the nomination, 15% say they'd back Trump over Biden in the fall. Dun dun dun! As we've mentioned before on this show, that's a double bite at the apple. If that happens again in the swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, then it's already over. This chart tells you a lot. 53% and 32% are very or somewhat enthusiastic about Trump versus 24% and 49% are very or somewhat enthusiastic about Biden. Comfy Dem voters are not quickly dissuaded from even a rapist, so these numbers may not change much. But even at these levels, it's a foregone conclusion that Trump is going to kick Biden's ass in November. There's déjà vu in these results. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton found herself in largely the same position 4 years ago. She too had a slim lead among Democrats for the nomination and ran essentially evenly with Trump among registered voters. And she lagged in enthusiasm with a low of 32%, very enthusiastic, in September 2016. Biden is 8 points under that mark now. If you break down the 20% left after the 80% of Sanders supporters who say they'd vote for Biden against Trump, you've got 15% who are Bernie or Trump, and you've got 5% who are Bernie or bust. So there are 3 times as many recalcitrant Bernie supporters who will vote directly for Donald Trump than 5% who don't know exactly what they may do, but they know they won't vote for a corporate candidate. Again, that double bite at the apple is what makes the difference. Last time there were roughly twice as many Bernie or Trump voters to Bernie or bust voters. This time there are roughly 3 times as many. Hey Boomer, it's all out there. ABC News is reporting this, so you can believe it. Biden is going to get his ass handed to him on a plate, and you know it. If you're listening to this or if someone shows you this video, you know it. If you're comfortable enough in your life situation to allow Biden to go up against Donald Trump, then it's on your head. Dear viewers and listeners, I'm reading you this because I want you to understand what 4 years or 8 years of a neoliberal candidate would do, even though there's no chance that Biden could beat Donald Trump. I want to make it painfully obvious to you that we can't have either Biden or Trump. Not only can we not afford to choose between 2 rapists for president, we cannot afford to choose between 2 imperialists for president. The U.S. is using germ warfare on sanctioned nations by Caitlin Johnstone. As billions hunker down to halt the spread of the virus, President Donald Trump has only ramped up sanctions and other pressure against frequent targets such as Iran and Venezuela, reads a new article by AFP. AFP stands for Agence France Presse, AFP.com. Agence France Presse is an international news agency headquartered in Paris, France. Founded in 1835 as Agence Ava, it is the world's oldest news agency. AFP has regional headquarters in Nicosia, Montevideo, Hong Kong, and Washington, D.C., and news bureau in 151 countries in 201 locations. Iranians say humanitarian imports have effectively been blocked as few foreign banks are willing to deal with Iran due to U.S. sanctions, leading to shortages of vital supplies such as masks, AFP adds. Ali Vez, an Iran expert at the International Crisis Group, which studies peaceful solutions to global problems, said the Trump administration likely believes that any aid would only throw a lifeline to a regime it sees on the brink of falling. It's almost like a bad joke. What's worse than a pandemic appearing in a country where there is no government? That is really the last thing that you want, the Quincy Institute's Max Abrams told AFP. We need to rethink our understanding of U.S. national security. It seems particularly absurd for the United States to invest so heavily in remaking foreign countries at a time when our own nurses in New York City are literally wearing trash bags. Indeed, in some very important ways, the US government has clearly seen the coronavirus outbreak not as a dangerous humanitarian crisis, but as a strategic advantage to be weaponized against governments which refuse to bow to its empire-building agendas. Weaponizing a virus is the thing that biological warfare is. The US government might not have deliberately released the virus, also not a settled question, but they are using the virus as a weapon aimed at toppling vulnerable targeted governments. The use of biological warfare, or germ warfare, is prohibited by international law, though in typical fashion the US is skirting the parameters of those laws, in this case by weaponizing a virus that was already spreading. Which is not to say that the US is above deliberately infecting a population using biological weaponry as well. They used them extensively during the Korean War. Thousands of Iranians have already died of this virus due to the difficulties US sanctions create in obtaining medicine, equipment, and resources, and it's possible that orders of magnitude more dead may follow. This is not accidental. This is deliberate. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has gone on record to say that the objective is to make Iranian civilians so miserable and desperate that they overthrow their own government, and it is clear that this virus is being employed towards this purpose. This same imperial war machine is actively attempting to inflict this same fate upon Venezuela, where tens of thousands have already died of malnutrition and inability to access medicine because of the Trump administration's brutal economic warfare. The DC-based International Monetary Fund has denied Venezuela a loan it says it needs to fight the pandemic, citing dispute over the legitimacy of the Maduro government, a dispute the US itself created out of thin air and narrative spin. On top of all this, the Trump administration is now offering a $15 million bribe to anyone who will help them arrest Maduro on ridiculous drug trafficking and terrorism charges. Who would benefit from a disease-ravaged nation not having a government? Certainly not the Venezuelan people. We're seeing the same germ warfare inflicted upon targeted individuals as well as governments, with Julian Assange denied bail as the virus spreads through UK prison systems despite doctors' warnings of his vulnerability to death from an infection due to chronic lung disease. We may be absolutely certain that at least a few people in at least a few government agencies have voiced the observation that COVID-19 may finally solve their Assange problem once and for all, and of course those observations would be a perfectly accurate appraisal of the situation. Psychopathic, but accurate. For all the outraged shrieking the US government does about disobedient nations like Syria allegedly using chemical weapons, it has certainly shown no hesitation in employing biological warfare today. Those dead Iranians are just as dead as the Syrian civilians who, according to the US government's plot hole-riddled claims, were killed by chemical weapons dropped by the Assad government, and they are dying on a much larger scale. They are dying of a virus that is being used as a weapon to topple a government which dared to disobey the dictates of Washington and its covert controllers, which means they are dying of germ warfare. Everything the US empire accuses unabsorbed governments of doing, the US empire does worse. That's the true meaning of American exceptionalism.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernier bus train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.